Okay, so welcome everybody. It's a pleasure to, well, being given the opportunity to try to moderate this panel. So I think you already know most of the people here. Well, four of them have been speakers. Auguste, he's from Math Inc. So you've just seen the presentation by Jared this morning, and you've not been introduced to Paul-André Melliès, who's directeur de recherche at CNRS in Paris. He's a logician, mostly in computer scientist, logician. And so therefore, I'd like to start with him with one question. So we've been speaking about agents the whole week on artificial intelligence, mostly to make mathematicians' life easier. So my question is, do you think there's something else? So something deeper to be learned by the fact that these tools are helping or are contributing, or in a sense, with mathematicians, beyond just making our life easier?
Okay, um, I was discussing with, recently, Stefan Mala, yes, and he told
Perhaps
me,
you can say a word about who he is, where he is.
and he told me something interesting that I would like to repeat. I think it's, so he's someone working on signal processing, and then he thought a lot about machine learning, and yes, and so he told me something like a little bit provocative. He said, you cannot really do mathematics using logic, you know, and I'm a logician, so and the reason is it's about the high dimensionality of mathematical thinking. That there are many features that we combine together. So maybe, you know, reading a book, or I don't know, walking in the street, seeing something can connect to an idea, a mathematical idea that we will develop then. Yes, and this is not in the proof as it is. And I think, you know, a question is, you know, what are the, like, you know, dimensionality of a mathematical problem? I mean, maybe, it's a way to answer, and I will stop here. But the fact that, of course, the proofs are here to make sure that the reasoning is correct. But the way we build the proof, you know, what brings us there could be, you know, much more open. And in a way, the fact that agents or these tools are linguistic at the beginning, you know, like LLMs, and the fact that they can do mathematics is probably means that there are deeper structures that we need to understand. Yes.
Thanks. And I see that Emily, she wanted to. Yep. I think you need to switch it on. Yes.
Great, thanks. So I'm interpreting your question as, you know, sort of wondering if, or maybe within the framework that we're hypothesizing that an AI model, an AI agent is doing mathematics, you know, accurately because we have this miraculous environment, which is a computer proof assistant that enforces some logical rigor that's perhaps not built into the AI architecture otherwise, if it's just a stochastic parrot or whatever. But something that I've read last week and I've been thinking about ever since is a blog post summarizing an article produced by Jesse Wolfson, and then there's a co-author who I don't know and I've forgotten his name. I apologize. They're both from University of California, Irvine. One of them is a mathematician and one of them is a philosopher. And they make the point that sort of formal mathematical proofs, so mathematical proofs expressed in a formal system like dependent type theory or something else, are sort of, sorry, the fact of a mathematical proof being formalizable is sort of neither kind of necessary or sufficient for it to count as a proof within the mathematics community. The arguments in both perspectives, you know, the argument against necessity and against sufficiency are both interesting, but maybe because I'm already taking too long, I'll just focus on the fact that it's not sufficient, that something be formalizable for it to, you know, really capturize mathematical reasoning. And I think an example came up yesterday in Marina's talk, where there was the question about whether the formalized proof of the sphere packing will reveal the intuition that led you to discover this sort of magic special function that makes everything work. So my instinct is no. I guess I'd love to hear your comments.
Yes, I would also maybe think that there is this distinction between formal mathematics and mathematics at all, and they are just not the same. And maybe it's a good thing. It's about because we don't really know what mathematics is, and maybe we don't really know what philosophy is, and maybe we don't want to constrain ourselves too much because maybe one interesting part of the game is that we can always change rules, and but then of course the existence of for formal mathematics and now a computer assistant proofs, it just probably forces us to think about mathematics in a certain way or explore certain sides of it, which probably would be very difficult to do it otherwise. But yeah, but I think it's kind of really interesting dichotomy that of course the formalization is important and we want to do this, but also we still want to keep ourselves, at least I would like to keep myself open to things which are not formalizable yet, or maybe in the future there will be also like new ways of what to understand as formalization and how we want to formalize. So I think it's also like it always is life. It's not nice to constrain yourself and to stick to the rules, but sometimes it's also nice to evolve and to change them and to capture some new things which we. And then maybe if we don't make this distinction, then maybe we cannot even understand the difference. So this is somehow gives us this way to understand the difference between, to really see what in mathematical thinking now, what is formalizable and what is not yet.
And so, and this led me to a question for Leo, which is, had you known that AI was coming, would have you done Lean differently?
Wow. Unclear. I honestly, I don't know. It's hard to answer to this question. I mean,
Or
even right now, I mean, is this affecting our plans for Lean? How we develop Lean? We are not changing our plans. I mean, we view AI as something that will help, will complement the users. We write proof automation today. We want to provide the users proof automation that's reliable. They understand the mental model. And people say, oh, may it become obsolete in the future? We don't think so. We view it as better moves for the AI. The AI will use it too, right? I think we're still in the beginning to see how AI will impact proof assistants. But even right now, we are not changing our plans. I mean, our roadmap was not affected by AI. We made one decision, like at the Fro, we decided that we are not going to invest on AI, first because we don't have resources, and there are many other groups developing AI for Lean. We want to focus on the system itself. So I would say no, it will not affect how we build Lean.
So you're not asking yourselves question like, oh, these change might help AI understanding Lean proofs, or these might be a good thing to develop because in this way AI would be more efficient in doing.
Oh, we're adding, for example, hooks for AI. For example, we have a feature now that's called suggestions. That's a SIMP. We use suggestions, grind, ASOP, and so on. And we're making it in such a way that any group developing AI for Lean, they can hook their AI there. Okay. And the system will use the suggestions provided by the AI instead of some heuristic, hard-coded heuristic.
Okay. Well, and then this leads to the other question, the companion question for August and Alex. Should MATLAB be different since now we have AI? Should we? So MATLAB has been conceived by many people, and it is now quite clear. Well, there are rules. There are probably not written rules, but in a sense, there are rules that are enforced by the maintainer team and how MATLAB should develop. And all these has been thought for humans, or at least for usability from experienced Lean MATLAB users. Should it be done differently? Or, well, doesn't mean that they will change, but would have been useful to have it done differently.
So this is a great question, actually, in the sense that we are thinking a lot about this at Mathink and what could be better as an interface for AI, or what could not be better because it's already great. So the question is more, what can benefit more AI than humans? How can we improve this interface so that AI can interact maybe faster, etc. And very often we find that this is very much aligned with what is better for humans as well. For example, this new module system that is developed in Lean is also very useful for AI, because this is a bottleneck also for us as well with AI, because if you want to modify parts of MATLib with AI, you want also to make sure that it will compile faster. If you want to modify a particular lemma or a particular annotation, you want to make this change available as soon as possible to the other parts of MATLib. And if you have to wait, let's say 30 minutes every time you make a change, then it slows down the whole system. Having things like module system makes everything much simpler. Similarly, having tools to search MATLib is something that even for humans is a bit difficult. So building better tools for that is also aligned with human needs. Mm-hmm. So to me, it's not clear yet what tools would benefit AI but not humans, for example. And so building tools that will help humans formalize better, building a better MATLib will also help AI. I also think that the opposite is true. Building tools that will help AI might also help humans.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. And Alex?
Yeah, I would broadly agree. I think, AI is, at least for now, they live in the human design world. Like, I think we see this in things like robotics and things like that, if you want something that's gonna help you, it should fit through your doors, and it should be able to operate the handles of your doors again. I think the same is true for MATLib. I think the organizational structures that are designed for humans to easily find things are good organizational structures. I think things like having a strong naming convention so that names are kind of guessable by someone with enough experience is, again, something that's like useful no matter who or what you are. The thing that I would say is that I think MATLib should be more ambitious. I think they should aim to go faster. I think they should aim to do more. I think we have technology to do so, and I think MATLib is a great project, but it is still, I would say, in its infancy in some ways, right? Like, we're still a long way from being able to say to a random person in a mathematics department, hey, like, come, take your paper, start formalizing it. I think there's often a sort of, some sort of survivorship bias or something like this, where you get really excited when you hear about this technology and you say, okay, great, I'm going to come in, I'm going to formalize my paper. I mean, I should say this happened to me, so this is not projection. And then you realize that you can't, and then you get very interested in the technology for its own sake, and you start kind of working on these smaller problems, and you write some papers on these things, and you kind of get used to the status quo, and you kind of forget that actually your excitement was something like formalizing your research to begin with. And I think we do need to go a lot faster if we ever want that to happen. So I think there are some things that maybe need to be automated more or better, and I don't think those should necessarily be in conflict with the human goals for the project. Like, I think those do often align, but finding ways to reduce the human effort that goes into, say, reviewing MATLib contributions, integrating them, incorporating them, bumping, all that sort of stuff, I think it will benefit all of us, and it's necessary if we really want to make this thing sort of a daily driver for mathematics.
Okay, so I completely agree, but then let me ask something slightly harder. So I say, oh, MATLib is great. It's great that it has a very good naming convention. It's easier for humans and for machines to guess. Sure. So why is it so hard for a machine to write decent MATLib code? Well, you can start this time, and then we'll get it. August.
I don't know if it's. I think you have to start writing correct code before you write decent code, right? I think
like human. Like humans.
Yeah, exactly, like humans. Like, the first code I ever wrote to MATLib, I mean, you can go look at it if you scroll back in the history. It's ugly, it's a mess, right? Like, I think the machines are just still on this sort of part of the journey, right? And I think we've seen this with, let's say, like more mainstream languages that AI kind of initially it went through a phase where it could kind of write stuff, but it was kind of ugly, didn't follow good conventions, and now we've seen that like Python code or something produced by one of these mainstream agents or models is kind of looking more like the sort of code you would want to write. So I think these sort of things, they are necessarily second order problems. Like you would not want a machine that wrote really well formatted but utterly wrong code. So you have to solve the correctness issue first, and you have to make something that's useful first, and then you work around the edges. So yeah, I think it's natural in a sense, and I think it's something that me and August and everyone else should work on, because it's obviously important to people, and it's important for building hierarchies, for maintenance and that sort of thing, and that's really the next challenge.
And August?
Yeah. So I agree on one main point here is that current AI systems are built in a narrow-minded way for producing mathematics in formal systems, which is only mainly about proving theorems. They don't care about the big picture. They don't care about finding the best abstraction. They just care about solving the problem that they have been taught to solve. And second, these AI systems, which has been proven so far like multiple times, they are not as efficient as humans. So even if MATLAB is already a big library with more than 200,000 theorems, for AI, it's still not enough data to learn how to formalize like in a MATLAB style. And they are not able also to find find better abstractions out of this automatically. So I think what we need is either more data, but this is hard to get, or a better way to incentivize these models. So far, like new methods are using reinforcement learning to fight against this issue of data. But for this, you need a good way to measure what is a good abstraction, for example. For proofs, it's clear. You just want the proof to be kernel checked. But for abstractions, it's not clear which signal is correct, and that is not gameable in that sense.
Yeah, thanks. So speaking about style, so there's one question I'd like to ask Emily and Marina in some order, and this refers to a Quanta magazine article where they interviewed, among other people, Mark Kizin, who's a mathematician at Harvard. For those who didn't know him, he's a number theorist, Harvard, especially in arithmetic geometry, and who wrote, if you look at a typical English department at a university, it's not usually staffed by people who write literature. It's staffed by people who critique literature. Likewise, mathematicians might assume the role of critics who closely analyze AI proofs and then teach them in seminars. So what do you think?
Sounds like a sad future.
That's, I mean, I'm not committing to anything. I'm just quoting what he wrote, and I want you to have your feedback or your opinion on this.
Maybe that's my. I don't know whether this is the future or not. I have no way to say, but it sounds like a very sad future.
Why?
I prefer somehow active approach to life. I don't know. Yeah, if you like say me like if I wanted to enter the literary like realm of literature, would I prefer to be a writer or a critic? I would prefer to be a writer. I don't know, but maybe that's just my maybe just my personality. It seems like more, yeah.
But you would not be working at a university then.
I mean,
it's a work like another one.
Yeah, but I get like at this stage of my life, I spend maybe like most of my life at the university, but maybe there is still life outside. Who knows?
We hope so.
we hope so. But yes, I still would think that there is difference between literature and mathematics, and yeah, I do think that being a writer is a much more exciting profession. And mathematics, it's not so much about like producing mathematics. It's actually about, like it's all science. It's also about understanding life, making choices. And yeah, so I don't know. I prefer a future where people are still like active mathematicians.
And you don't think that, in a sense, AI would interfere with your
I mean, probably it will interfere with everything, but yeah, it's so I don't know. I like the way I prefer to think of AI is mostly more like a tool than yeah, a kind of a person, which might be a wrong point of view, but.
And Emily?
Right. So, so while critic, referring to the person, and critique, referring to the product, is the word that's typically used in English for this activity, I think maybe something a bit more descriptive would be kind of interpreter and interpretation. So if you read these sorts of products, I mean, I'm not a scholar, but Zadie Smith, for instance, is one of my favorite writers in the English language, and she does a lot of criticism in addition to writing novels. And, there's really a lot of creativity involved in a piece that maybe is structured around critiquing somebody else's work, but the critic, uses that as really a starting point to make, whatever the point of the essay is. And so maybe a more positive spin on what Mark Kissen is suggesting is something like that. And I think it does reflect a role that is often played by mathematicians today. There's the person who first discovers a proof of a theorem, and then there are the people who understand the discovery. So one example, my history here might be slightly wrong, but I believe that in Galois' writings about what is now known as Galois theory, the concept of group does not appear. And I think that's maybe related to the fact that, his work was not publishable for sort of a decade afterwards. Maybe arguably nobody understood it. So whoever came back and extracted or developed the framework which we use today to understand Galois theory, I think played as fundamental a role in the creation of Galois theory as Galois did himself. And I think there's a lot of examples like this. I've heard that the Cartesian plane, in a sense, isn't entirely due to Descartes, but it's somebody else who was reading Descartes and understood what he was doing in developing these Cartesian coordinate systems. So, this is an activity that our community values, and I certainly don't anticipate AI is having that capability in the near future. So maybe this is something humans can do in the meanwhile. So.
Thanks. And Paul-André, I see that you are nodding in particular. Yeah, so also in comparison to Auguste remarked before that in a sense we need more skills in creating abstraction and thinking, so taking perspective.
So, I mean, Galois is a nice example, Descartes. And I was thinking about, Remy's talk about Kolmogorov. And so, there is this, it's more than an anecdote. So Martin Löf, who invented dependent type theory, was a student of Kolmogorov. So he started in the Russian school. And he was fascinated by the ability that these people had, this group, to describe something that is evanescent, like, Brownian motion. Think about it, how can we produce a mathematical description of something like Brownian motion? It looks like poetry, how can you construct a linguistic, conceptual framework that will express the fact that a particle moves? It seems nearly impossible, but I mean, they were able to, to build a system, to analyze it. We can think about it again. And this is where we should be. I mean, this is Marina's point also. We should always be very careful about the new forms of mathematics. Let's say pieces of life or experience that mathematics tries to capture in its own way. Yes, and from that point of view, there is a dynamics, and of course, we are looking at proofs. We are building, in this proof assistance, and really a question is, by understanding better and better how proofs work, how maybe we can understand better how concepts can be designed so that these proofs work. So in the case of Brownian motion, the gap between Gaussians and Brownian is fascinating. This is an example, but Gaussians existed in a way that is maybe more. We can imagine that there is a mathematics for Gaussians. the fact that there is a mathematics for Brownian, and I mean, it's quite incredible. And how, I mean, this call was able to move from one to the other is quite, I mean, beautiful.
Thanks. But then this leads me to a question for Leo. So far we've been speaking about using, well, trying to interpret these AI results to help us get an insight of what a mathematical proof is or mathematical argument is. Why aren't we witnessing more AI used for metaprogramming? So neither Aristotle nor Gauss, to the best of my knowledge, nor alpha proof, nor other, they still are specialized in metaprogramming. Do you think it's because of metaprogramming itself, or for other reasons?
For math, you get a strong signal, right? We have a checker to check if the right. I mean, for metaprogramming, you can get an indirect signal, right? You can try to generate a metaprogram and run this metaprogram over many. Suppose that this metaprogram is proof automation, right? You're trying to write a ring solver. You could try to run it over many examples, right? But now the AI has to be good enough. Well, maybe a human collects a collection of problems that the AI will try to solve. But I believe the signal is way weaker, right? I mean, you're going to have to write the program, then run and figuring out which part of the program is failing, right? So it's causing the failure is much harder. When Aristotle is trying to generate a proof, he's doing step by step. He can see if he makes a bad move, right? You may have to wait until the end to see if the move was useful, but it catches mistakes immediately, right? The signal is much stronger. I think it's much easier to do reinforcement learning in this case.
That's true.
Yeah.
But large language model, they speak, well, they produce language, which is even weaker as a signal, I would say. I mean, they are able to write in English. So I would say that metaprogramming should be somewhat in between.
Well, but English is not black and white here. I mean, you can write something in English. You may look, oh, it's good enough. I mean, but it's not perfect. But the metaprogram, if it's implemented decision procedure, it should be is correct or not, right? I mean, it's black and white in this case. But I believe some people. I was at NeurIPS last weekend. Many people were talking about trying to synthesize metaprograms using AI. I mean, and people at OpenAI were saying, "Oh, this is a challenge that's worth our time to try to build AI that through reinforcement learning will learn to write metaprograms." Yeah, maybe we will see this happening next year. Maybe Alex can tell. Maybe he's working on
exactly. Augusto, Alex, do you have something to tell us about this?
I don't know.
You don't know what you are not allowed to say.
No, I think it's a lovely goal. I mean, it's sort of, AI extending its own space of moves, and that is like a really powerful concept, right? That's similar in some ways to how humans learn a new technique or a new approach. They learn a new move, you learn a new algorithm in a sense, and then you can apply it later on. And I think there is a powerful kind of meta learning story there. And I think I can see why the people are excited about that. Yeah.
Yes, so I completely agree with that. In the sense that, okay, we want more like better and better abstractions. And very often what we find with AI generated proofs is that there are patterns that are coming back and back again. And we would like AI to be able to extract this instead of, because it has learned the pattern, it knows when to reuse it, but we will now want the model to be able to extract this into a metaprogramming tactic, for example, so that it can reuse the component in different proofs. And the main advantage of that is that just like humans, once we have a proof like this, for example, the ring tactic, we don't have to think about all the low-level details. We just know, okay, the ring tactic will solve this. We don't have to think, okay, we need to do commutativity, associativity, etc. And so this reduces the cognitive load, the amount of reasoning you need to put in the problem. So the better abstractions you have, the easier the problems become. So I do think that having a model that is capable of extending the set of tactics in Lean, for example, building ones that are a bit higher level would really help both AI and humans going faster and faster at formalizing new math contents.
And Paul Andres Auguste is the second time that he mentions the need for AI to learn better abstraction. And it seems that this is something they are somewhat weak at. So they're good at finding proofs, but they're not very good at finding abstraction. So how would you interpret this? What was your take on this one?
Yes. Yes. So, I mean, I think there is an interesting question is how we write mathematics between humans and how we explain it. And I think sometimes having a very linguistic approach to it, like, you know, really looking at the way mathematicians write books and how a proof is written, we can find patterns, like, I mean, that then maybe we can think about, you know, is, like, let's say, natural language mathematics a form of high-level, like, programming language that would then be compiled into a lower level. And if you think about the story about, you know, proof assistance and Lean, they are here to help to turn semi-formal, you know, formal, semi-formal mathematics into pure formal mathematics so that it can be checked. Yes, so, and there is a proof witness. So can we go even higher? And an example, I mean, I just want to give is, you know, when we discuss with other mathematicians, what they will tell us is, oh, you know, I'm doing this theory, but I remove this axiom, for instance, or I have this variation of it. So it's not defined by, you know, internally, but it's defined by an external structure. You know, once I was walking, we had a 15 minutes walk with a mathematician. He explained me he was doing some kind of differential equations, but with something not there, which could have been, I mean, which would usually be there. And I understood roughly what he was, you know, doing. And this very high-level description of the kind of mathematics we're doing, the theorems, is clearly missing, but at the same time, we would never even think about it without what's going on currently. So I think there is a large space of, but it's very open and difficult to understand exactly what we need. So practice and hard work on systems is important.
Yeah, Emily?
So there's this old question of whether mathematics is discovered or created. And at the risk of oversimplifying, so overstating the case, perhaps proofs are more often discovered and abstractions are more often created. So I guess I don't personally believe that every abstraction is created. You know, there's a sense in which the number 6 is an abstraction and that one's probably discovered, but we could think also of something like the concept of a topological space, which is certainly a very useful abstraction and captures many examples and has an explanatory power, but you could imagine how that particular definition might have come out a bit differently. So in any case, this might be one way of thinking about why, you know, a model that is excellent at search has an easier time finding proofs than finding abstractions, creating abstractions.
Some very nice answer. And so we've been using the verb to learn at several, well, machine learning at several times already. So it's part of our job is to teach. And so it's part of someone else's job to learn when we teach, in principle at least. So my question is, so we've seen both in Alex and Emily's example the project this week, AI is being used more and more, well, at least it's being connected more and more to teaching and pedagogical activities. So I might also ask you, what are you doing with these? But I'd like more, or at least to start with another question, which is, what do you lack now? Well, you know, what would have you lacked 3 years ago with previous, before AI came into the game, that you think that AI can solve? Because very often I see people saying, oh, this would be very nice, we can try these, but I don't really see what kind of question they are addressing. So what are the failure of current teaching that might be addressed with AI? Marina, Emily, or whomever.
I think in teaching it's usually this like laborious process, right? So there's a lot of moving parts, and many of those parts probably can be automated or made easier, or
Like what?
yeah, well, I don't know. Submitting homeworks, grading homeworks, returning feedback, organizing exams. Yeah. I mean,
So it's
it's
basically
a big enterprise, right? Usually, like in a big class, there will be some hundreds of students, and I don't know, like scheduling things.
so administrative business.
Not only, but also somehow yes. So there are many things where AIs could be useful, like maybe answering students' questions, or like helping manage questions. I don't know. I think we're already, like in our university, we're already using it. For example, in almost every class, usually there is like a what's the right word for it, like a chat where students can ask questions, and sometimes these questions are actually difficult and they require somebody like an assistant or a professor to answer them. But sometimes there could be some like simple questions that other students can answer, or even some kind, or even AI could hint to an answer, or maybe some topic already was discussed and it would be easy to somehow just say that like actually a question was already answered before. You can just look at this discussion in here. So another thing which we discussed with colleagues, for example, for grading exams, probably we don't want to outsource this to AI. It's a sensitive topic, but maybe what could be happen is, for example, I could check that, for example, like the grades are consistent, because it's very good in clustering things. So to see that, okay, so these two exams are actually very similar, but the grade is very different. So maybe this is that nice to see and look what has happened here. But I think all these ideas, they are already being implemented in various universities to various degree. And so maybe now we're also going through a bit of a growing pains when all systems are changing and they're still not working very well, and we have to get used to them. But yeah, so
But you don't see any, in a sense, deeper use. I mean, I don't know, some problem that we were witnessing in the way, more or less all over the world, the academic.
maybe have a bit like a conservative view on this, but I do think that how teaching is a very like interhuman interaction is really important, and like if you are ever like an organizing teaching program, really what is like the goal for university is the human power, actually, people who can interact with other people, and this is usually the most scarce resource. And then what I would like actually to, for whatever tools we have, is just to keep this precious resource for like most important most human tasks, and for example, outsource all the things which are routine and boring, and maybe not all that important. Probably I would be a bit scared to say to my students, like, if you want to learn this, like, go to chatbot and it will teach you everything. This seems like an irresponsible and scary approach. But then, yeah, if like all the many like routine things that I do, it's like last year, like some kind of cheese system in our university has changed, and I had to prepare exam, and I had to like so I actually love coming up with problems, like creating new problems myself. I think it's a fun and very interesting and important part of my work. But then I also had to like somehow paste my exercises into some kind of like a form. And it spent me hours and hours and hours. And so if some kind of like agent could do that for me, that I just give it, like, this is my tech file, or this is even my handwritten exam, and like, please just insert it into it. Because, and then if I could be somehow confident that even if it's a handwritten note, it would insert actually the things that I have written, and will not come up with, its own ideas and creativities. So this would be great, but yeah. This is maybe more like a science fiction.
Well, no, I don't think it would take long.
Maybe a few years. Maybe next year it would be like this. Who knows?
Chancellor. And Emily?
Right. So Marina's absolutely right that I think the very best part of teaching is the human interaction between the sort of the instructor and the student. But the way teaching often functions at the university, there's could be a big gap between the instructor and the student. So, I last fall taught a linear algebra course with 200 students in it. And so I did not have much personal interaction with the students. And in a course like this, if a student has a question in the middle of a lecture, that can be difficult to ask. There might just not be time to ask every student's question. The students in the room are all at sort of different places in their understanding, and the question whose answer would really help certain students would not help other students. Perhaps it's sort of over their head, or it's something that they understand already. Another feature of such courses is, we try to engage students actively in the learning process, and they'll do some exercises and they'll turn them in. And then there's a gap of, maybe a week after turning it in before it's returned graded. And at this point, does the student even remember what they were thinking about when they solved the problem? So if there was a mistake and it's been corrected, are they back in the headspace where they can understand exactly what went wrong? So those are the avenues where I feel like AI has the most potential. Marina mentioned a chatbot, but if you could have a question answered in real time every time it comes up, if you could have help reviewing the concepts that you don't understand already, if you could be corrected in real time, if we're doing automated grading, I think, main advantage is that it might be instantaneous, that the moment that a mistake is made, the mistake could be corrected and the learning opportunity could happen there. Those are the potentials. The concerns, of course, are, that the AIs are not only grading the students' homework, but also writing the students' homework and sort of leaving the student out of the loop. And, a thing that I'm worried about both in the pedagogical context, but in the context of AI tools for formalization and for proof writing is, what will somebody who doesn't know how to write proofs now, who comes of age in the presence of these very powerful tools that can effectively write proofs for them, what will such a person learn about proofs? So.
But still, it seems to me that we're not, we're not ambitious enough, probably. We're not, why aren't we bringing Aristotle and Gauss in our classrooms in one way or another? I mean, if this is the future, it might not be the future, but if this is the future, we'd better prepare our students for this, no? Shouldn't we?
I mean, I would be very reluctant, with no offense to the folks here, to bring either of these tools into the classroom for exactly this reason. I mean, the point of going through this exercise at all is to help somebody learn something new. And I mean, sure, there might be a point when what you want to learn that's new is how to interface with Aristotle or how to interface with Gauss. But I feel like that point happens much, much, much later and doesn't necessarily need, my involvement as an instructor.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, maybe if I thought about like an analogy that might be useful here, like between, I think I went through this through the game which Alex Kantorovich created, and somewhere he has this analogy, and I liked it a lot. It's a bit like comparing teaching to, like exercising, going to the gym, right? And like on one hand, of course, all kinds of devices can be useful, but then if you're going to the gym for the purposes of being fit, then bringing a robot who will lift weights for you is not very useful. Or as you say, like, let's be ambitious. Like, why don't I go and just like now, like press this, I don't know, 200 kilograms. Maybe it's like a good goal or I don't know, like run ultra marathon. This is a good goal for the future. But maybe if I just try to do it right now, then it's maybe not such a wonderful idea. I have to train before maybe start with this like smaller, like 2 kilogram, 5 kilogram things, or maybe like run 1 kilometer. And I think similar it is for students. So these like very powerful tools, they are, of course, we want to prepare them to whatever happens in the future. But before students can get there, they probably have to do some kind of, this, doing smaller steps, do easier exercises, and to build up their strengths to be ready for what's coming.
And what's the view on the other side from Alex and Auguste? So on this pedagogical and relationship with students business.
I completely understand the question and the concern about it, about this technology. I'm thinking mostly about analogies.
Buongiorno, parlo con Montanari Fiercostante?
In mathematics.
Sì, buongiorno, sono San Giorgi. Ci siamo sentiti qualche mese fa a proposito di Bagnacavallo, quell'accesso, eccetera. Posso chiedere una cosa veloce? Ok.
have no idea what to do. Beyond listening to this interesting conversation, which is stopped. Okay.
Okay, looks resolved now. So I was thinking, for example, in mathematics before, like in the beginning of the 20th century and before, a lot of computation were done by hand. A lot of these things were done by hand, but nowadays we don't do that anymore. We have computer algebra or even calculators. And similarly for computer science, not many people do assembly anymore. We are doing things at a higher abstraction level. And I really see these prover agents, Gauss and Aristotle, as a new level of abstraction, and AI in general as a new level of abstraction. So we still need to learn the basic steps because, for example, in school we still learn how to calculate, we don't learn assembly, but we still learn about stack, etc. I think we still need to learn these things, but not as deep as now. For example, maybe for proofs, we just need, to understand the basic logic and then some concepts, and then we can go at higher abstractions level. We know the basic steps. We just want to go beyond.
So you would like to see Gauss and then Aristotle taught in classes?
Yeah, potentially.
It was your role to answer this, and then let's say, and then perhaps Leo will have something to add.
Yeah. I would say that it's important to learn to do these skills, mathematics, logical reasoning, sort of problem solving without these tools, but also with. And I would also want to think not only of the way that these tools exist now, which are very kind of like chatbot-like. They encourage the user who's, had a busy week to just ask their homework questions and get an answer. And I think one of the things that was most effective when I was teaching was to give the students some problems and just to walk around the room and look over everyone's shoulders and see who was struggling. Everyone's working on these things, and to kind of say, okay, how did we get here? To provide kind of like a gentle interjection, right, of someone who is clearly working on the problems. And I think there are definitely modes of these technologies that will be more like that, more like an attentive and helpful TA that will not simply answer the problem, right? They'll wait for you to have made some progress and then guide you if you get off track. And I think that sort of version would have a lot of the benefits of this technology without some of the downsides of sort of, encouraging people who feel like they don't have enough time to kind of take a shortcut. So I think we should think of different modalities here, and we can definitely find things that sort of have less drawbacks, let's say.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of potential in education, especially we have to realize many people in the world do not have access to proper education. AI, and also I want to distinguish between students that are being forced to learn something and students that really want to learn something. For students that really want to learn something, AI is great for them. I mean, you can ask millions of questions and you can go deeper and deeper. They're going to break. I mean, suppose you have Aristotle, they will not be happy with the proof that is produced automatically. They want to be able to do themselves. And I see lots and lots of potential. Very few people have the privilege to be students with Marina or Emily, and enabling them, the students, I mean, and I think there are bright people all over the world, right? And AI will enable the ability that even if you have access to a great book, just talking to AI, you move so much faster. I mean, and you're still reading the book, but you don't get stuck. You keep asking questions and keeps pushing, and it's and I think it's just the beginning. The AIs are getting better and better. I have learned subjects that I was not an expert using AI. I cannot even imagine doing without AI anymore. I think there's lots and lots of potential, especially for people that really want to learn. I mean, I see all the time there's students that they don't want, they want to cheat, they want to use Aristotle. And for these students, it's bad. But for people that really want to learn, I think I cannot even imagine without
But in
AI.
a sense, you're still describing a somewhat passive use of AI from the point of view of teachers. So because what you are describing are students who are willing to learn, to go very deep, and they are using AI on their own, and this, you're saying, enhances their chances of understanding. So you don't think the teachers themselves, professors or educators in general, should introduce these tools, or it should be left to students to discover and to use them? It's different in a sense, right? The approach.
Yeah, I think it's really hard for someone to have been. I mean, AI is everywhere now. I think. Do you need to tell students that, look, you can ask this engine questions and to answer?
I don't know.
I'll be surprised. I mean, if students need. I think it's not a worthwhile students. I mean,
for instance, I had students, and Ricardo had the same experience, I remember, so that did not know that you can save files on a device, because on a mobile, well, everything is never saved. So the idea that at a certain point you have a file that needs to be saved, just this notion was elusive a little bit. So it took a while to get to the point where, no, you have a file, you put it somewhere, meaning you save it. So I agree it's a stupid analogy, but there's a certain point if I don't know, we are perhaps a preferred audience here, and it's very easy for us to go out and discover and try things, even if they are not perfectly polished. It's not so easy, I would say, especially for people in difficult conditions.
Yes.
But maybe I'm pessimistic. I don't know.
Yes. I'm not sure if I can say that's in a politically correct way. This kind of people, for me, is now stupidity buckets. I mean, they don't know you can save a file. I mean, yes, it's crazy.
Yeah, I agree.
Give me a dinosaur.
I mean, just to corroborate that point, for my teaching this past fall, I had 12 first-year undergraduates install Lean, and by far the most difficult part was putting a folder somewhere on their computer.
Exactly.
So. Yeah.
But this is because they've grown up with newer technology, right?
Yeah.
They've grown up with everything cloud-based.
Yeah,
like
sure.
we think it's stupid because we grew up saving files and doing these things. I think the point with these AI technologies is this is the new technology they are now growing up with. And so, yeah, it's maybe natural that they don't know these things because they've never needed it.
Yeah. Okay, so switching a little bit, but first of all, let me say so. I will soon ask people if you have questions. So if you want to come up with questions, they will be welcome. I still have a couple of questions for the panel. So so far we've been speaking about AI really and math, and there is this idea, and perhaps it's also a little bit harmonics or mathematics idea. This I don't know. That we should rather start with mathematics, which is hard, difficult, abstract, and so on. And then at a certain point, if AI is able to do good math, most probably will be able to do. So what do you think about this, Leo? Do you really think that starting with math is the best stress test for AIs, and so that we will eventually move to other applications, or are they completely disconnected? Or is mathematics completely disconnected from other science in a sense, and so that even if we get very good agents at math, they might still be very poor at other sciences?
No, I think this is great to start with math. I mean, as you keep increasing, the amount of interaction with the real world gets messier, right? With math, you're living in abstract worlds. These are great, and it's useful for everything. I mean, when you're verifying cryptography, you use math. When you're verifying differential privacy, you're using math. Math is everywhere for science, for computer, for software developments. Yeah, I think it's a great way to start.
Okay, and yep, Auguste.
So same, I have another analogy. So I wasn't born at the time, but in the 90s, 1996 and 1997.
You were not born at a time?
1996. But at that time, we had the first AI to beat a human, beat the champions in chess. But before that, people believe that, okay, if we manage to have an AI that will beat a top human player in chess, then we will reach a sort of AGI at the time, because we'll have solved reasoning. But this didn't happen. And then for Go, same story. I believe the same story holds for mathematics as well. Mathematics, in some sense, is still a narrow set of human intelligence. We have a lot of other things like social intelligence. For example, philosophy. I don't think that we can solve philosophy by solving mathematics. Also, I think that nowadays we have AIs like this AI system, GPT-5, Cloud, Gemini. They are very good at general intelligence. They are not yet at human level on everything. So while I think that we will probably reach superhuman intelligence in mathematics before other domains, I don't think this will directly translate into superhuman intelligence level in other fields, just because we reach that level in mathematics. We need different techniques for other kind of intelligence.
Alex, do you have anything to add to this?
Yeah, I would just say that I feel like, many fields, even if they don't maybe explicitly say, we're using this mathematical model, we're using that mathematical model, are often doing such things. And I think there will be a lot of crossover with other, certainly scientific domains, with technology that's trained to do mathematics very well. Yeah, so maybe I'm maybe a bit more optimistic about that than August.
And so, but then I have follow-up questions. Well, related questions. These are so applications of AI and of your agents in particular, Gauss and Aristotle, to AI. So there has been this discussion, and I also asked this question about producing MATLAB-ready code or very polished code. Well, this is nice, but it's great for the MATLAB community. Now, a mathematician who is not interested in formalized mathematics, they're just interested in formalizing their own result, they might really not want MATLAB-ready code. They want something that can be understandable and by someone who doesn't know MATLAB, with all these conventions and all these abstractions. So do you think, first of all, are you focusing, perhaps the question is, in a sense, are you focusing on MATLAB primarily? If yes, why? If not, why? And do you think that addressing other people who are not in the community is relevant and interesting for you?
So, for example, for the strong prime number theorem project that we formalized at Mathink, it's not MATLAB style. And it's okay for maybe like one result that we want to formalize, but there are results that we want to reuse that are in it. For example, Borel-Karaterodori results, some about Cauchy formula, etc. And we cannot really reuse them as is because the abstraction is not good enough. I think in the long term, while we want to formalize people to help mathematicians to formalize their paper, we also want to make sure that these components can be reusable, just like in MATLAB. Because otherwise it means that if we want to formalize this paper that is far off of what is contained in MATLAB so far, we will need to reformalize everything from scratch. And every time this happens, we have to reformalize everything from scratch for each paper. So I really think that we need auto-formalization agents to be able to produce MATLAB style of code to have reusable components.
Yeah, I would say even MATLAB contributors do not produce natively MATLAB-ready code, right? They produce something that works, and then quite often they golf, they optimize, etc. I think we've seen that there are many projects now that build on top of MATLAB, but maybe have slightly looser conventions, right? MATLAB is an artifact optimized for reuse and sort of stability over time, and most people don't want that. And I think certainly the goal is to produce things that are useful to a majority of mathematicians, and that often involves contributing to MATLAB, but it more than often than not does not. Right? It involves, just doing a throwaway, sort of in the same way you might do a Jupyter notebook to do a throwaway calculation. You do a throwaway piece of mathematics. You just want to know if something is true. You don't necessarily want to archive it forever. You want to check your argument works, and then be happy. And so, yeah, I think that use case is extremely important for us.
And so, yeah, Emily?
I just want to push on this point because I think it's really important. I mean, whether we're talking about formalization or sort of research more broadly, there's the fun part of it, which is the discovery of the ideas and the sketching out of the thing. And then there's the drudgery of it, which is the, writing up of the detailed paper, the documenting the software that you've just created, the PRing your code to MathLib. And I'm extremely sympathetic to these projects that, do not want to divert so much of their energy to that process. But my personal view, which is maybe not everybody's point of view, is that this is harmful to the community. And part of the obligation, if you are formalizing some mathematics that is maybe not just of interest to you, but potentially of broader interest to the community, is to actually go through those extra steps. What I worry in the future is that someone will have a new formalization target, and 2/3 of it will require some mathematics that has been formalized but is not in MathLib and is thus in one of these sort of tangent repositories, and now perhaps it hasn't been maintained. There has been some updates to MathLib in the meanwhile, which of course, when you change a definition, you fix whatever it breaks within MathLib, but you're not obligated to fix whatever it breaks in some of these internal repositories. And people will have to spend a whole lot of time doing this drudgery work that really was the part of somebody else's project. When it's humans involved, you can imagine, there's sort of being human factors that affect, really, who, might be willing to support another person by doing some of the cleanup for somebody else's work. But particularly if it's sort of a human and an AI agent, what I really, really am concerned about is that there will be people who will have a harder time in the future getting credit for their formalization project because, some aspect of it has sort of quote unquote been solved already, but not in a usable way moving forward. So.
Yes, I agree. Do you see a way for the math community to reward people that put this extra effort? How far are we from?
I think maybe part of it could be enforced via a norm. So there's an analogy perhaps in the publication process, which is, or in the sort of research process, where the expectation is not just that you quote unquote discover a proof of your theorem, but then you actually take the time to write it up in a paper and get that paper, submitted to a journal and through the refereeing process. That's something of an analogy here. You could imagine, this is again, a controversial idea that might not be everybody's, but perhaps, the annals of formalized mathematics won't accept a paper unless it describes a formalization project where, the majority of it is in MathLib.
Well, we somewhat have a line along these lines in the web page saying, well, that we value very, very much if a project has been able to make into a library, be it MathLib or other library. Yeah, but this was exactly one question we've received by the audience, and also I wanted to ask both Marina and Emily. Do you see a future in math departments for people specialized in formalizing mathematics, or would you rather say that this is something that every mathematician would just do as part of their everyday process? Like, we don't have, or rarely have, tech experts in our math department, and certainly this might be a typographical skill, but not a mathematical skill. So how do you see the future in this perspective?
I don't know. I'm not very good in predicting future.
Well, let's say, what do you hope?
So actually, I don't know. Actually, at the moment, I can tell like our math department. Actually, in our math department, for some reason, we don't even have a person who does logic. For some, I don't think it's probably historical reasons for that. But in our campus, so there are people who are interested in formalized mathematics, but they're more either in the computer science department or in the philosophy department in like not in our university, but in a nearby university. So in this sense, and also like, among my colleagues, actually not that many are interested in formalized math. I think they're still very comfortable with doing the informal math that they do. So I think in a math community, mathematicians who are interested in formalization, at least from people I know, I don't feel like it's a majority movement yet. So in this sense, I don't know actually what the future will be, but maybe people will just keep working as they work, and or maybe there will be a shift. Maybe there will be a change of phase, and more and more people become interested in this, and this becomes really a part of. So like it would be not interesting just to submit a written paper, but it would be really a standard to also formalize it or even to contribute it to Matlib. But here, well, predicting which way things will go, I think it's difficult. So as you say, like maybe there will be no need for person because formalization will be done by agents, or who knows. So here, yeah, I would be reluctant to predict things.
Yeah, I tend to be more optimistic on this front, maybe in the medium term as opposed to the very near term. I mean, it is always challenging to hire somebody into a mathematics department in an area that's not already represented in that department, just because, mathematicians tend to understand their work better of the people who are in closely related areas as opposed to somebody who's in a far off area. Sometimes they're sort of constituencies. It's more exciting to have a potential collaborator than somebody who you wouldn't speak to. But I think there's a few things that are in favor of somebody with capability in computer formalization. I mean, firstly, to this last point, there are mathematicians who would like to formalize their work and just have no idea where to start. And by far the best way to get started is in collaboration, ideally in sort of a synchronous collaboration, whether it's on Zoom or even better in person with somebody who knows what they're doing. So that's sort of one constituency. But I think another one is through teaching. So if a standard part of your curriculum is, say, a course in algebraic topology, and there's nobody in your department who could teach such a course, then that is an incentive for the department to hire somebody into an area that they don't have already. And I think in the medium-term future, there will be demand from students. There will be a competitive advantage for departments that can offer courses that involve computer formalization in a significant capacity. And some departments right now would be able to teach such courses, and a lot of them would not. So,
yeah. And so there was one question for Paul-André. So we have mainly, well, for reasons that are clear to everyone, probably, we have basically been identifying math formalization with Lean and Matlib this week. So you're perhaps one of the only representative people of someone. Well, no, Emily has been working a lot in other proof assistants as well. But so, well, both on what we were discussing about the need for experts in formalized mathematics or formalization in general, perhaps not only math departments or collaborations among departments on the one hand, and more generally, what do you think about the other proof assistants? And the way all these speak to other proof assistants, or to which degree it is rooted with Lean, which I personally love. And but
I mean, there is something which is, I think, fascinating, is that the solutions used for formalizing mathematics in Lean and in like Coq or Rock and other systems, they are based on the same logical framework. I mean, so of course there are Isabelle other systems which are based on first order logic, but so dependent types are important. And so the question is, of a linguistic logical nature also, is how these dependent types describe mathematical reality. And so this is one aspect, how they are used as a vehicle for thought, but also how they work and are connected to, for instance, monads and effects, and more on the programming side. And also how they're related to classical logic and other forms of reasoning. And I think this is where having a number of different systems, and I think in Emily's talk you mentioned RESC, and so it's very important because we're looking for systems which can describe part of the reality, and the challenge is that we want to have systems also that can do that in a reasonable amount of time. And for instance, for identity types, it can be complicated, cubical types, and so really there is, I would say, a huge linguistic, logical undertext that we will need to. And so, of course, there are different systems, and it's very, but really, deeply we want to understand the underlying structure of the mathematical language, and also, ideally, understand how this structure is related to the structure of language, as a whole. And in particular, maybe, maybe one natural hope is to replay what we did with like verification of software, but, in the statistical, like LLMs, when does your machine learning system work properly? Can we verify that? Okay. And clearly the extraordinary experience we have with mathematical, logic and the mathematical language should help, for instance, to understand, when, your statistical system maybe will do something we really don't want it to do. Yes. And so in particular, I think there is something hidden in all what you're doing. We're speaking about is how do these things work, and how the statistical system reason. So for instance, unification plays a central role in, like systems like Lean, or, we need to unify to understand some kind of meaning. How do these statistical, purely linguistic a priori models in the end reason? And I think we are really, really far from understanding that. And, so you mentioned chess, yes? So it's a little bit like with mathematics, we hope that we can understand better these deeper structures, and this is where the different systems, in fact, are kind of unified in that search, I would say, yes.
Some of the mathematics that excites me the most right now might be described as synthetic mathematics. And what I mean by synthetic is mathematics that is done in some domain-specific formal system that's optimized, say, for algebraic geometry or differential geometry or higher category theory, as opposed to something that's designed to be a universal foundation for all of mathematics. So an example of this that you might have heard of is homotopy type theory, which was mentioned in Leo's talk earlier this week. What I find exciting about it is, firstly, I think the proofs are really beautiful. And then there's also a sense in which the proofs are more understandable than some other proofs of similar results. They're more understandable because the synthetic framework is often designed to make it more efficient to give a fully rigorous argument about the particular mathematical objects within the domain. And I think this is one of the few forces that, abstraction maybe being another one, that's kind of fighting against the ever-increasing complexity and complication in mathematical arguments. Now, computer formalization, computer proof assistants are just a wonderful tool for engaging with synthetic mathematics, for learning as a mathematician trained in one formal system to write correct proofs in another formal system. I have personal experience with this. I was exposed to homotopy type theory over the course of many years, and then started trying to write my own proofs in homotopy type theory, and I wasn't entirely convinced that my proofs were correct, and indeed they weren't entirely correct until I started formalizing them in AGDA, and then immediately corrected my misconceptions, and now I feel confident that I can give an informal proof in homotopy type theory, write a paper proof in homotopy type theory, also write a formal proof in homotopy type theory because of this tool of computer proof assistance. Now, there's a challenge in this vision for the developers in the room, for the engineers in the room, which is to design computer proof assistance that can be used for this sort of mathematical multiverse of domain-specific formal languages. There are real significant engineering challenges there in supporting different type theories that can be quite complicated. A lot of homotopy type theory these days is sort of multimodal, and there is no existing proof assistant that can be used to formalize some of the arguments that are appearing on paper these days. Then there's, of course, also questions of interoperability, but I would love to see this type of mathematics, the style of mathematics supported. And so in the future, I hope there is support and effort, not just around improving Lean, but improving other experimental proof assistants that could be stood up to accompany these new formal languages.
And Leo, do you have something to comment about this?
No, I talked quite a bit to Emily earlier this week. We were talking about these ideas of having these islands that will grow independently, but eventually, if we have really well-developed islands, people will build bridges between the islands. And even another thing that we have to keep in mind is that all systems die. One day, Lean will die. I mean, it will be something, even for the same islands, islands for dependence type theory, equivalent to the one used in Lean, but a new system. And that's one thing I was worried, but Emily had a good take. I mean, building again is a good thing. I mean, people will build better, they learn, students are going to be super engaged in building the library from scratch again. Yeah, I think I sympathize with the idea that we're going to have different proof assistants and eventually bridges between them. I mean, yeah, I'm excited about this future.
And August and Alex, do you have any, well, are you aware of Mathink or Harmonics thinking about these kind of things? One thing I can, so I tried launching Aristotle yesterday on a rock file without any comment, just to see what, and it came out with a, well, decent translation into Lean of the content of this file, almost compiling. So it had some struggle with some lists, but it was basically compiling. And but so of course we might use these tools to translate, but always towards Lean. And so the question is, are you thinking about, well, using your agent, or would it be possible, feasible, interesting to adapt your agent to other proof assistants? Auguste wants you to start for some reason.
Yeah, I would just say that, I mean, obviously these things have more in common than they do apart. And I think we definitely think that there are, there's a high chance that if you were to do this sort of, separate training for a different language, it would benefit from the training it already had in one language. Yeah.
But you're not planning in the near future to develop a second Aristotle, I don't know, Platon, to work on rock? You don't have anything to say. I see. August?
I think there are also technical questions about it, because using a different formal proof assistant means that we also have to have new tools developed specifically for that. So supporting, for example, rock needs that we need to reprogram, for example, a REPL for rock, make sure that the interaction will be maybe similar or not. The workflow might be different, so it may mean that we have to develop agents differently for these different systems. So this is only from a technical perspective. From an ideal perspective, I believe that it would be better to train a model on different systems, because it will also enhance the generalization capabilities of the model, because it will be able to understand, okay, these underlying concepts behind formal languages. And then another technical issue is about data, because in Lean, there are a lot of mathematical concepts that are formalized, on which these AI agents can build and reuse. We could also use Isabelle, for example, but in rock, so I'm not an expert in rock, but I believe they have more results about computer science, but not that much about mathematics in general, at least in comparison to MATLib. So to me, it's more about technical difficulties rather than conceptual ones. But the other lines of research that I think are interesting is we are talking about auto-formalization, but there are not a lot of research about translating from one formal language to another. And I think this line of work would be very interesting, at least in the future, because we may imagine that we come up with a formal language that has better foundations, that may, I don't know, enhance automation or maybe enhance clarity or the fact that we can read more easily. And if we can solve that, then it means that we can easily switch between formal languages, and maybe this way we could focus more on foundations on these formal languages, and then agents that will build on that, formalizations that will build on that, will be swappable.
Thanks. So are there any questions from the public in all these? Yes, one question there and another question here.
Yeah, my question is concerns pedagogy. So maybe I wasn't a model student, but I really related to Leo's point that, you know, students who want to learn will learn, and students who don't want to learn won't do it. And I think when I recall my undergrad experience, I really did want to learn, but sometimes I felt like the incentives weren't really stacked in my favor, in the sense that, you know, like, I also had to learn how to do my laundry and cook, and sometimes I just didn't have time. And so it's like, even if I wanted to learn, because the homeworks were graded and they really counted towards my final mark, I would just look up the answer. And I feel like I really don't envy teachers right now, because now it's so difficult to incentivize students to learn when now they have access to these tools. And there was a lot of discussion about whether they should introduce them, but I really believe that students who want to find these tools will find them anyway. So my question to the educators in this room is like, how do you think you can best incentivize students to learn in this day and age?
Yes, but maybe I can start. So this is actually something I'm thinking a lot of this was discussed in our department, and I also think that, for example, if on one hand as a teacher, like one of my least favorite tasks is grade students. It's like I like talking to students and I like explaining things, and I really don't like grading. And I think many teachers probably can relate to that. But at the same time, I also think that giving fair grades is important, and this is because, as I said, like it could happen that some students people who want to learn, they will learn, and people who don't want to learn, they don't learn. But then everybody finishes university, everybody has the same diploma, same degrees, and it would be sad that somebody who really learned and invested a lot at the end is indistinguishable from the sea of people who just feeded their homeworks into chatbots. So in that sense, I think it's still important somehow that when we are grading, that we do our best to make sure that the grades are somehow fair. And of course, it's a very difficult task. We can never do it perfectly, but we somehow, as the teachers, it's our responsibility to make effort to make things fair for the students. And yes, and so this is also the question. I don't know the answer, but one thought I have is that still somehow this like physical presence and communication with people is important, because like, at least from my own experience, I think the most the most powerful drug in the world is another person, right? So this is this is really what our motivation system is somehow trained on doing. And in this sense, I love when students come to my lectures, when we interact, and I'm very sad when there is a student whom the only time when I see them is at the exam. Usually it's somehow it means that there is something wrong with what I'm doing, because I do believe that when you are a student, you interact with other students, and you see how other people learn. You have an opportunity to talk to a tutor in class, to a lecturer during the lecture. So all this kind of human parts of like I've done well, somebody told me that I'm a good person, like a good student, or this did not work, this upset me, and other people see that I could not do it, this upset me even more. So all this kind of basic psychology, it still did not vanish even in the digital age. It still works, and it is a big part of motivation. And but the question that you ask, I think it's a very good question, and we have to. The people who teach, they have to think about it, how to make it work. And of course, I'm not against students using tools, and it's good actually. We are preparing students for the future, and these tools will exist in there, so they have to know. Like for example, in our university now, at the first year, students learn how to use Lean. Oh, so not Lean, sorry, Tech. not linear, so some decades ago. But that's like when I was a student, with like I like it was something we had to learn on ourselves at like later course. I remember how painful and difficult it was. I think there is like societal progress does exist. That now this is something where students learn at the first year, and we even somehow incentivize them to submit their homeworks written in LaTeX. Now, of course, with all the like chatbots and so on, maybe this is the policy. Maybe we could. Think back on, but yes, I think this is just a very good question, and we have to think on how to keep like, to make teaching process or learning process still happen and still be real, not to be replaced by some synthetic things.
Okay, so can I just ask a little follow-up question? I really agree with the point on fairness, but I wonder how you can quantify that. Because, for example, at my university, some students had more money than others. So, like, for example, I had to cook all my meals, but some other students could just buy their meals and they had more time to work on homework. Or, some students had a harder time fitting in because of, some bias or something. And so they had less help from other students and had to work alone more. So it's like, how do you even decide what's fair or not? I think,
Yeah, but okay, this is not an easy question, but I think like we do have like our exams and I don't know. I don't think we have some kind of possibility to say that I cooked today, so that's why you give me more points on my math homework. I don't know. We don't have that system, but yes.
Paul Andre?
Yeah, maybe I want to say something. So in education, when we get to the point where we're closer to research, so like in master, we see students who understand that they are building their own self, their own trajectory. So something happens that they were passive, they were waiting for the grades, and suddenly they feel active. And so I agree with, Leo, about the fact that these tools, we may hope that they allow people to be more proactive, and build their own trajectory. So the question of fairness has a lot to do with the question of passivity with respect to the grades. You did your best and you have a bad grade. It's really, but it's a passive view. If you think more about, like, for instance, the way Zulip, works and how people can interact and build communities, you feel like very early, you can get a feeling of building yourself. The true values of education, in a way, maybe, outside of a grading system and selection systems. Okay, that's a positive, optimistic view. Yeah.
There are some couple of other questions in the room.
Yes, thanks a lot for the discussion, by the way. So I had some questions, and first question was related to the discussion that came up in Emily's talk as well, and that is like these AI agents not able to produce MATLAB style proofs. So in my head, it seems like it should not be a very hard task. Like if a proof works, if it verifies and is generated by AI, I think it should be easy, or like we can train AI or we can build agents to convert it into MATLAB style proofs. Are there any specific issues or blockers that you guys find which can help like people who are working in it to basically train those AI agents to convert those proofs into better MATLAB style proofs? Because I don't understand what are the specific blockers there. So if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if there are specific blockers, but one issue of, trying to optimize for style is that it's hard to quantify, right? There are obviously rules that you can enforce, but, whether one thing is better style than other, there is a sort of like an aesthetic quality to it and a sort of a human preference quality to it. And that, obviously, if you're doing some sort of reinforcement learning, is a bit of an obstacle, right? You can train on human preference data, but I don't know that that's sort of like so much of that for something like MATLAB style. So yeah, I think there are definitely a lot of low-hanging fruit that definitely can and should be done there. I'm sure August and I are both thinking about and will probably implement. But there is fundamentally a question of like, defining what it means for good style. And I think those questions are always, trickier without some sort of human input.
I see. So we don't have a clear definition of MATLAB style proof. That is something that I would take from here. And but something like
different, maybe one way of saying it is like different MATLAB maintainers would disagree on
Okay,
what the correct,
I see.
and this happens all the time, right? And so if you have obviously a group of 20 people and they disagree sometimes, like there is obviously not an objective truth there.
Okay. I have just one different kind of question here, and this is related to something which I work on. So it's been thought, like, especially for people who are working in AI, that doing mathematics is something like gameplay. And this came up in Lean discussion as well. When you are interacting with Lean, it's like playing a video game. But is it true for mathematics as well? And why I'm saying this is because many people who are working on automated mathematical discovery, they are using game playing setups to basically build AI mathematical discovery setups as well, where the game playing mechanism is like there's an agent who would propose conjectures, and there would be an agent who would try to prove them, and then you basically bootstrap both of these systems together, and it's like they're playing game with each other. So I just wanted to know the opinions of where the people from various domains sitting in the panel. So if you guys want to talk about this.
So the question is basically whether mathematics is really a game.
Yeah, it could be modeled like a game playing setup or not. Or it's much more than that.
Yeah, I think you can interpret various parts of what mathematicians do as games, right? Think of proving as a bit of a game, where maybe it's a one-player game against, the obstacle, which is the mathematical universe or something. It's like a puzzle game, and you can think of these conjecture prover games as somehow games with opponents. I think the thing which makes those games harder than the games we're familiar with is that the two sides play very different roles, right? And so it's hard to kind of balance the sides. It's sometimes very easy to make very hard conjectures sometimes. So like my favorite example is, in number theory, there are all these properties of numbers that are really rare. And so you can just pick two of those that are sufficiently rare, and you check it for the first, 1,000 numbers, and like, voila, you have a conjecture, right? It's almost certainly true. There may be no good reason why it's true. You may discover it via some sort of discovery agent, and yet it's almost unprovable. I mean, does that make it a good conjecture? Does that make it a bad conjecture? I think many number theorists would find it a relatively boring conjecture, because they would give this heuristic argument as to why it should be true. And then they'd say, okay, I don't have a proof, but like, I'm convinced enough, and there was no rhyme or reason that led you to this conjecture that made it interesting for me. I can't see how the proof would really explain very much other than this sort of heuristic. So that's a long way of saying I think the sides play very different roles, and certainly to sort of balance those two is I don't know. It's not clear, right, how you do.
Yeah. If I may add a bit about what Alex said. So in games, what defines the games are rules. So when we do theorem proving in mathematics, okay, we have this rule, we play against the formal system, like the compilations. But for example, for conjectures, it's a bit hard to get a set of rules to play against. So as a whole, I wouldn't say that mathematics can be seen as a game. Like subcomponents of it can be seen as a game, as long as you have a definite, an explicit set of rules. But I understand that for conjecturing, it's a bit harder. For this research, for example, in AI, we don't have yet research in this field because we don't have explicit rules. So it's a bit harder to formalize.
Okay, thank you very much for a great discussion. I have, two quick but basic, but also questions that are in the form of definitional challenges for you. So you've used some words multiple times, obviously without defining it, taking them for granted. But I think it might be very interesting to have some, maybe not formal, but some operational definition of what we mean when we say the word understanding. And the reason why I'm saying that is I would really like, at some point, spending some effort in saying things like, let A be an agent and let X be some concept or problem or whatever. And we say that A understands X if this and this and that, right? So because I have some notion of some, ability to recognize some patterns, some ability to manipulate the concept and query it multiple times from different angles, or some notion of level of conceptual control that you have over X. But I'm really interested in what you think about this. So and then use this operational definition to the question: can computational agents, like eventually like Aristotle or something like this, understand? Because for me, the answer is obviously yes. But I would like to know your opinion on this.
Who wants to start?
Yeah.
Paul-André.
So I mean. First of all, I mean, about games, and we do that all the day. You know, we interact with people. We don't have access to their brain, their consciousness, and we try to understand whether maybe they understood and maybe whether we understood also. You know, and in a way, it's what I mean. You could say the science that studies that maybe the closest is maybe logic and psychology. You know, and there is this kind of debates, and what is fascinating is that now these debates are not anymore like, you know, maybe in the margins, they're central, and so we use words that we would need to define. So I agree, yes.
Other people feel like defining what understanding is?
Yeah, I don't think this is a quick question.
Well, the question is quick. The answer
I would just say, I mean, I don't have a good answer. I mean, I think this is definitely more of a philosophical question, but for me, understanding is a spectrum. It's not you understand something or you don't. I mean, obviously you could say that about some basic concepts, but you know, some people would understand it better than others. They have more control, and so yeah, I think we use understand to shorthand mean like understand relatively well or understand to an acceptable level. But at least in mathematics, I think we're often reaching for objects that we know we will never understand fully, and so yeah, I would say that these agents, etc. I mean, they're reaching a certain level, and I once again, I think it's hard to ascribe these human notions to a mind that we can't accept.
Emily?
I'm not sure I like this answer, but I'll give it anyway. So Alex's framing of understanding as a spectrum, I think, is very helpful. If we need to operationalize that, the first thing that comes to mind is the ability to answer questions, and you know, where a sort of better test of understanding is a question that is completely unlike any other question that has ever been asked before that interacts with this concept. Of course, that is difficult to measure, but you know, if we're talking about understanding specifically of a non-human agent, I think the sort of AI skeptic point of view is that all that were happening is seeing repetition or parroting of or regurgitating of answers to questions that have been asked over and over and over again and are on the internet a million times. And so therefore the agent knows the answer. So I think there is a real art in designing questions that are novel. And, you know, my understanding is that the experts in the industry are able to trip up large language models by designing questions like this. And it would be interesting to explore something similar in a mathematical realm. Yeah.
So I just want to just to say a small word about the fact that there is a bias when we do logic or here about proofs, yes, and counter models. You know, in logic there is this kind of tension between proofs and counter examples. Mm-hmm. And for instance, for education, it's so important. And understanding is asking new questions, but also understanding that there are counter examples, and this is where there is a kind of game thing that we need to find conjectures which are likely because we don't see I mean, either we see that they maybe are tangible from a proof side, but also there are no counterexamples that we can imagine. And so, but what I wanted to say after is that, in fact, what we call understanding is our own human, you know, interaction, because this is our daily life. You know, we need to understand when other people understand. And to make, I mean, to turn it into something more tangible, as you know, definition and so on, is a fascinating exercise and needed probably.
Yeah. Okay. Are there other questions? Yeah, there's one question here, and we'll likely be the last one, and then we can close. Yeah, please.
Yeah, thanks for the discussion. Starting from, it was mentioned, that the discovery of the concept of a topological space, which is something that could have happened differently. Do you think it would be feasible or useful or interesting to have AI systems that may be capable to refactor some of our basic mathematics, find some abstraction that we somehow missed, as opposed to just formalize what we have or just prove frontier math, which is obviously a target that we have in mind.
Yeah, so I do think this is useful, always in the sense of getting models, finding better abstractions. And we will need to do that eventually. If you want to have a kind of MATLAB style agent, auto-formalization agent. The question is always how do you encourage models to find such abstractions, at least the ones that are interesting. I think in that sense, it's also a bit similar to conjecturing in the sense that it's ill-defined, but still useful. Yeah, so these are the research directions that are not yet that popular. Most of the research in AI for math has been focused on finding proofs, having prover agents, because we have a clear signal here, while conjecturing and abstractions, it's a bit like philosophy. We don't have yet a good way of doing this. Maybe we can do like what we discussed earlier, some kind of human preference data, but even there, it's not very, I'm not very optimistic for this path.
Yeah, I might disagree here. I think something Andre said earlier is that, a lot of the reason we humans use abstraction is because of sort of a communication. Like we have a low bandwidth of communication. We have to communicate ideas to each other by moving our lips and stuff. And, we only have so much time in the day. And so, I don't want to be every time repeating the axioms of a group. So I say, let X be a group. And I think, AIs often have quite different constraints in that respect, that they can maybe hold more bits in memory at once or something like that. But I think at some point there becomes a sort of a natural, like emergent property that you want abstractions because the objects you're talking about become too involved without, and you actually can't proceed without inventing some abstraction. And so even training a model that's only trained just to be really good at proving things and not even to be stylish, etc., I could imagine as a sort of emergent property, the ability to create abstractions to sort of shorten the proof lengths or to unify concepts or to repeat yourself less, kind of being a learned behavior.
Maybe to come back about these things. So I really like the energy also between AlphaGo and AlphaZero. And AI has really got better than humans at Go, drastically better, but just playing by itself, knowing by itself. I also think that for AI in mathematics, we really want to have AI that are capable of coming up with abstractions on their own without having to copy ourselves. Like what happened with ChatGPT, for example, in the beginning when they introduced this human preference data. Okay, models looked better, but what really triggered an improvement in reasoning is really reinforcement learning that were using a clear signal and not human preference data. So yeah, I do think that we want to find better abstractions in an automated way. Like it should be self-discovered by the model and not a signal that is incentivized by humans.
Okay, thank you. So I think that our time is up. So I suggest that we all thank our speakers, the intervenants.